NDOI, America's Insurance Talent Showcase.
Can you imagine walking away from 520 accounts? A book of business you built yourself in order to go after your dream of becoming a $1 million producer? Well, that's exactly what today's guest did. Garrett Yates is a 36-year-old property casualty producer with a $1.2 million commission book of business. Garrett, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Let's start with a little bit of your backstory. Give me a glimpse of your past. Where did you come from? What did you do that ignited the idea that you could sell?
It's actually kind of a funny story. I started off as a state worker. I started off with an accounting background and started in taxation, and was working a 41040 with the state and wasn't making very much money at all, and wanted to try to figure out how to do something to make a little bit of extra money. And my father was an insurance recruiter, my father-in-law. He asked me if I wanted to, on my days off, to help him make cold calls to help recruit producers to various different agencies that he worked for. So I started helping out on Fridays and making calls to various random producers, a list of people that he'd give me, and I would interview producers and talk to them about their book and how much they were making and their backgrounds and so on and so forth. And I started getting this idea that, gosh, there really wasn't a lot of what I thought were smart insurance producers out there that were making a lot of money, and kind of got the idea, hey, maybe I could do this. And so my father-in-law kind of started guiding me down the path, and it was during a time that our state was going through its first budget crisis, and I decided to take a leap of faith and went and got my insurance license, and right from there just jumped into it.
So you jumped in. Did you know where you were going to land, or how did you decide where you were going to start?
I had no clue. I didn't even know what limits I carried on my own auto insurance. I mean, I just literally took a complete leap of faith and hoping that this was going to work out. So what I did to start is I'm from a very small town in Northern California, and decided to start looking at, Yellow Pages and what agencies were kind of around. Told my family what my aspirations were, and my dad said that he has a vineyard and a little winery up in the area, and started saying, hey, well, our insurance agent is X, why don't you talk with that agency? And so that's where I did, and that's ended up where I ended up landing as my first job.
So give me a story about your biggest or your most difficult sale.
I don't feel like my sales have been difficult overall. I feel like if you're doing the right things, you're targeting the right clients, if you're looking for the prospect that actually is going to fit your mold, your culture, and your beliefs and values, that the sales should be just kind of right in line. I've had a lot of situations where I've been burned by people that will kind of bring you along the path of, yes, we are interested. Yes, we want you to go through this process. Yes, we're, interested in all of the services and everything that you're talking about. And at the end of the day, they take your number and just turn it back over to their agency, and then never really return your phone call, or, I've, been down that path before. But I wouldn't say that I've had any real difficult sales. I've had a lot of big sales. Those always make me a little bit nervous because because they are large, that if they happen to leave, that is a pretty dramatic impact on your book. But I've also found that when you've gotten to the level of making those larger sales, if you do lose one, there's always one that's coming right around the corner to kind of replace it. So I think that's one of the biggest fear when I've talked to a lot of producers, that they're afraid of the big account, because when they get the big account, they said, well, what happens when you lose the big account? Well, when you're writing the big accounts, you're also talking to big accounts on a constant basis, that your pipeline should be full of replacements no matter what.
So define big account for me. What is a big account for Garrett Yates?
A big account would be something in the six-figure revenue range. My target premium is probably $250,000 to $500,000 in premium. So we're looking at $25,000 to $50,000 in revenue is something that I'm targeting. Large accounts would be in the six-figure range.
So there is always a ladder that the insurance producer goes through to get from wherever they began, the day that you walked into that small agency in Northern California, to the kind of accounts that you are working on today. So what did that ladder look like for you? Where did you start? How did you get to working on $25,000 to $50,000 revenue commission, that would be commission fees, accounts?
I started off, like I said, at the very beginning, I knew nothing about insurance. So my days were involved by going into industrial parks and just going door to door and writing any and everything that I possibly could. And every once in a while, you'd stumble upon a larger account. A larger, at that time for me, was $2 to $5 to $7 to maybe $10,000 in revenue. What I learned very quickly was that I wrote so many small accounts that they were overwhelming. It became cumbersome. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't grow. You kind of reach a capacity, and I was definitely at my maximum at that particular point in time. And I also realized that the larger accounts were just as much work as the small accounts. So why was I spending all of my time and wasting my time on small accounts that weren't really paying me and becoming what I would refer to as fruitful? So I just started switching my mentality and going after the larger accounts. But it took some time to figure out what those were when you don't know anything in the insurance world. So when I started kind of realizing, okay, when I'm looking at an account, I need to look at employee size, revenue size, fleet size, square footage, all of those different things that kind of combine to obviously look like a much larger business that's going to have some premium behind it. When I started writing those, I found out early on that the quickest way to get more accounts in that arena was talking to those folks after you've done a really good job and asking them, hey, who else do you know that might have an interest in talking with us? In our agency, we refer to them as red hot introductions. And I would say that 75 to 80% of my time is spent on accounts that come from a referral source. I don't do a lot of cold calling any longer, and pretty much just go off of, the introductory.
So I think you told me at one point that when you were starting out, you got to where you had about 600 little tiny accounts that you were working on. As you started to shift into the larger accounts, what did you do with the small accounts? What happened to them?
Well, I realized that also if you want to get into the, so to speak, $1 million club or get into writing bigger business, you need to have some sort of substantiation behind you more than just selling an insurance policy. The last thing you want to do is to gain clients for just a price standpoint. At the agency that I worked at prior to, we had nothing but an insurance product. There was no outside auxiliary services of any sort. So I quickly found that I needed something to be able to differentiate myself other than just the insurance product. So at that particular point in time, I started looking at other agencies that would be a fit, and that's where I landed at Interwest. And
you left the small accounts there at the previous agency?
So, exactly. So in my transition, Interwest didn't have really a lot of interest in 600, small business type accounts. So I essentially, again, had to take another leap of faith going, okay, well, I've built up a relatively small book that was obviously doing much better than I was when I was at the state, but I wanted to kind of break through that ceiling and kind of go to that next level and get into, making a six-figure income. And in order to do that, I had to go over not only to Interwest, but I had to leave. I think I took out of the 600 accounts, I took 80 with me. And even of that 80, I would say only maybe 15 of those were of size enough that are still on my book of business today that is of any substance at all.
Where did you get the confidence to go after these big accounts? Where did you get that chutzpah? What instilled in you that ability to do that? Was there a person in your life? Was there something that you could say helped you see that bigger opportunity and go for it? Because that's a bridge that a lot of producers struggle with.
I don't think that there is any one particular person other than my own drive of things that I've wanted to achieve. And so, Keith Schuler, we sit down and we have, our goal setting meetings, and he kind of always laughs and says, well, I could always put a number in front of you, but I know that that's not going to be good enough for you. You're going to be harder on yourself than I ever could be. So, so be it. And that's just kind of the way I've always been. I mean, if I want to go buy a new car, or if I want to go get something else, I'll go out and work and find the accounts and just do it. I have some sort of odd drive that just keeps me, going, and that's just what I do.
Is there something beside the size of an account, is there a specific industry or nature of account that you target?
I target a lot of stuff in the healthcare, trucking, transportation, construction, manufacturing. Those would be areas that I would say I have a focus in, but I really enjoy various different types of business. When I first started out, I was really a generalist. And with my tax background of being an auditor, I've seen a lot of various different types of industries and businesses and how they're run. And that really kind of always has fascinated me. It's kind of like, how it's made on TV. I get to do it in real life and go see the manufacturing companies and the processes. And so that is kind of the exciting portion of the job as well. And really, that's kind of how I target my clients.
So give us 3 things you've learned that if you learned them earlier, you might be farther along today.
The 3 things that I'd say that would be really important that really kind of expedited my learning process, or would have expedited my learning process, is the importance of an agency culture that has the services and the platforms that can really help support you in your sales process. The other is the actual sales process itself. We utilize Randy Schwann's and the wedge process in our agency, and I think that's been tremendously successful. And third and finally, I think is not being afraid to go after the larger accounts at an earlier stage, because the thing that I had found is that the small accounts are just as much work as the large accounts. Might as well get paid for it.
Okay, that makes sense. Weigh in on image when it comes to the insurance industry. Do you experience yourself a lot of unscrupulous competition out there?
More often than I would care to admit, especially in certain sectors of the construction and transportation arenas. There's a lot of brokers that will lie, steal, cheat, cut corners, do anything that they can to write the business. And it's unfortunate because not only does that leave a bad taste in the client's mouth, but overall, it hurts our industry sector. It burns out carriers. It's poison.
Do you have any thought about what we could do about that? If you had some power, what could be done about that? Because we did a survey a couple of weeks ago, and that was the number one thing that brokers across the country said was the biggest issue with the insurance industry was our image, and that it was suffering. And right below that was unscrupulous agents and so forth. So I'm wondering, what do you think could be done about that? How do we work with that?
That's a really tough one, because I think a lot of that has to do with 2 key components. I think it has to do with the agency itself. The agency needs to be more aware of what their producers are doing and kind of audit them, so to speak, to make sure that they're being upfront and ethical and doing the right things. But even more so, because the agency could be the one that's corrupt to begin with, that might not be the solution. I think that the carriers are going to know probably firsthand and foremost when they're seeing multiple submissions from agents on a particular account, and one agent constantly has the outlying application, or they're receiving claims that aren't really corresponding with the type of risk that they thought that they were writing, or something along those lines. I think carriers can do a much better job of possibly auditing or policing, agencies that, aren't acting on an ethical platform.
So how do we help the consumers? So they're sort of the innocent victims of all this. They're hearing all kinds of information that may not be correct, and it's hitting our image, but at the same time, it's very frustrating to them to be able to get to the bottom line of what is the truth. How do you help clients or prospective clients get clear on where the value is and what is the most important part of the process that you're taking them through?
I'm not really sure I have an answer for that. I think that, people generally like to do business with people that they can trust. And I think that for just anything in life, trust is going to be kind of the foremost important aspect of anything. For instance, NDOI is a great way of people to do research and get backgrounds on somebody that they're looking to possibly do business with. So I think it's going to take a little bit of effort both on the consumer side as well as on our side of doing our job to educate people and promoting us.
Let me switch gears just a little bit. What advice do you have for someone who is considering a career in insurance, perhaps a millennial that we hear a lot of talk about the fact that 25% of our industry is going to age out in the next couple of years, and that the insurance industry is not hugely attractive, let's say, as compared to the technology industry, to the next generation. So what advice would you give for someone considering a career in the insurance industry, or perhaps what it might take to attract millennials to our industry?
I think that it's a very exciting job. And I think that people lose sight of that there's so much flexibility in our jobs, especially as a producer. You really kind of run your own schedule. You work as hard as you want to work. You achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. So I would strongly encourage people to look into the insurance industry. It's a very well paid position. And actually in all aspects of from account managers and representatives all the way up to the producer level itself. But it's also a very exciting field. I like like I had mentioned earlier, I like the fact that I can go out and see various different types of industries, that you're not limited to one specific thing. If you're unhappy with the construction industry or whichever, you can switch gears instantaneously and start calling on healthcare or churches or schools or whatever it is that, seems to excite you. Be
of interest to you. Absolutely. Now, you've told us the names of your top 5 insurance carriers. Some of the ones on the list were Travelers, Liberty Mutual, Zurich, Hanover. You also talked about a couple of wholesalers, RT Specialty, Brown and Riding. So why did you choose these, and what do they do for you that helps you as a $1 million producer?
That's a really good question. And I think that if I were to add a fourth to the list that you said earlier that I would have learned early on that would have helped my career, I would say is establishing a very good relationship with a carrier. It doesn't have to be a Travelers or a Liberty or a Zurich like I have, but I would say find a carrier that is like you, eager, that wants to write business. And when I say wants to write business, truly wants to write business, because we always have carriers that come in, they want a lot of business, but we need somebody that's going to actually be flexible and want to help you write business, and establish a relationship with that underwriter. When you establish a relationship and you start sending them business, the more opportunities you're going to have to write business with them, because you've done them good as well. And I think that goes a very long way. And my carrier partners that I had mentioned before are my go-to guys. I could call them up on the phone. They know me well enough. They trust me. And we can almost do deals over the phone sometimes. So I'd say that the carrier relationship and establishing and developing one with an underwriter is extraordinarily important.
So now, do you work with a marketing department?
We do not.
Do not. So you do your own marketing, and you have an account manager that helps you with the processing side of that?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Okay. So those relationships are absolutely key. How do you handle it when your relationship shifts at a carrier? All of a sudden, this great underwriter that you've worked with is now gone, and you've got a huge book of business, and you have a new underwriter show up.
Well, that has happened multiple times in my career. In fact, one of them just recently, where my underwriter moved from Zurich to Liberty. So fortunately, I have a lot placed with both, that there wasn't a dramatic impact. But, I have a conversation with the new underwriter immediately and saying, this is, kind of the process. Let's establish a relationship. And I try to continue in developing that relationship, which is how some of the carriers that I have has grown over time. But not every time that works. Every once in a while, a carrier or a new agent, a new underwriter will come in, and it's not, we might not see eye to eye. Sometimes the book gets split up. Sometimes it stays. It's kind of a tough one.
So let me get some, as we're kind of wrapping up here, I want to do a few kind of rapid fire questions for you. First of all, how long did it take you to get to the $1.2 million book of business?
This year is the first time that I was at 1.2. Last year I hit $1 million and then lost a $100,000 revenue account and went down to 900, which was a little frustrating because I was right there and then popped back up. And then prior to that, I had been hovering right around 750 to 850 for probably a good 3 to 4 years. I've been in the insurance industry now for 9, and I have been at Interwest for, actually, let me take that back. I've been at Interwest for 8, so I've been in the insurance industry for 11. So I've had a book that's been over $500,000 for probably about 7 years.
So you just said you just lost a $100,000 revenue account, but yet you didn't put it in your, most difficult scenario or hardest challenge category. How come?
Because I feel like that's the life cycle of our insurance industry sometimes. If you sit and dwell on every account that you either lose or you miss or you're near miss or whichever, you're just going to sit and dwell. You got to be able to kind of like, and in a sport, you got to be able to just, okay, that mistake is up and it's done and it's gone and you got to move on. The tough part of those $100,000 plus accounts is, typically speaking, they're national. Sometimes they could be publicly traded. You have a turnover in management, a CFO, a CEO. When the new management team comes in, inevitably they are carrying with them their own professional team in the backside as well. And sometimes that's an insurance broker. That's also how I've gotten my accounts, where my executive team moved from one company to another and I've gained it. So I feel like that's part of the life cycle that you just can't really dwell too much on.
So what's next for you? Where do you want to, what kind of a book do you want to have? Where do you want to take your career? My short and long-term goal right now is that I want to get to a $2 million book, and I want to, on a long-term basis, get to a $3 million book with approximately 100 plus, less than 100 accounts, which is very obtainable. So what's the number one thing that holds you back from achieving your dreams?
Len, I don't think I really have anything that's holding me back. I feel like I live them. I'm extraordinarily happy with my career, my family life, my flexibility, my income. I'm a partner in the organization. I really don't feel like there are limitations that are being withheld of any kind.
What's the key thing an agency needs to do to create an explosive growth culture in the agency?
I think in order for an agency's not only survival, but from a growth standpoint, is they need to keep the eye set on the age of their production staff. We don't have a lot of young new producers coming into the industry, and we need to somehow find a way to be able to balance out and train and bring in and develop younger producers so that it can continue to grow. And that's the only way that I think that that's going to happen.
What is something you think your competition tends to overlook?
That's a really good question, and I think, a really good response to that. I think our competition tends to overlook two very important things. One is they tend not to listen to the actual client and what they want. And two, they oversell themselves and the product. I think that if they slow down and figure out what the client actually wants, the sale will become a much easier process.
So in agencies across America, there are insurance producers that have books that hover in the 300,000 to 500,000 level and have been there for many years. What can you tell them as they're looking to hit $1 million level and haven't been able to do it for a long time?
We have a lot of those agents as well. I think the biggest thing here is that somebody needs to really kind of get real with themselves and be honest and say, why aren't you? Because they will come to you and tell you that they want to get to the next level and tell you that they need to break through this ceiling. The problem is they're just not doing it. And what they're not doing is they don't have the drive or the motivation or the want or the need. They'll tell you that they want to, but they're not showing, and there's no action or action plan that they're demonstrating to get there. So if somebody tells me that they want to get to that next level, prove it to me. Prove it. I mean, show me with your actions. Show me what you're doing. Otherwise, you have to be honest with yourself. Do you really want to be there?
Awesome. Garrett, thank you very much for being with us today. I believe there are agents out there that are going to hit another level because of what they've heard from you today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.